to Designed and Delivered for Destiny. I'm your host, Nicole Cherie. I'm a wife, author, life coach, business owner, and speaker. I was a mental health therapist for over 10 years, but now I'm bringing the conversations from my office and bringing it to you wherever you are. Each episode, we will discuss various topics related to your design, your deliverance, or your destiny. I'm so glad you're taking time out of your busy schedule to tune in. So let's go ahead and jump on in. All right, so this series, we've been talking about family, and this particular episode, I would love for us to talk about forgiveness. Now, I know this topic has been covered by so many people in so many different ways, but have you ever wondered why is it that we have all this knowledge, but in so many ways, we aren't getting the results? It's clear as day that we can see that so many of us, so many people, we're walking around with these feelings of unforgiveness, and we usually don't have to look that far because a lot of times it's right there within our own families. So I would love for us to figure out, why do we struggle to completely forgive? And I really want to try to be practical today and explore whether there are ways that you can actually be certain that you have forgiven those individuals who have hurt you. So to get started, I just want you to think about if someone was standing 100 yards away from you and they chose to use all their strength to throw a brick right at you, would that hurt? Yeah, I think it would, right? It may even injure you, but the chances are you will likely move out of the way before it actually hits you. I mean, 100 yards is a long distance, or that person may not even be strong enough, so that brick may not even reach you in the first place. But on the other hand, imagine if someone is standing within 5 feet of you and they throw a brick right at you. Oh my gosh, you will be injured, and the recovery time, it's going to be great. You're likely not going to have a chance to just get out of the way, or because you're not going to expect it, right? You're not going to think that somebody that close to you would throw a brick your way, so you're not going to see it coming. Now, this is just an analogy for the difference between when someone tries to hurt you that you don't really know that well, they're in your life, but they're at a distance, versus someone close to you, like a relative. And I think that we can agree that it hits differently when the person is close. So of course, it's going to take more time for us to forgive and let go of whatever that brick was that was thrown. And too often, people find themselves in these situations where they're carrying all this hurt because of something that someone close to them in their life has done. Because the hurt, it feels different. Let me ask this $1 million question up front. Should you forgive a person who is standing within 5 feet of you and who throws a brick at you with all their might? And let's put this in real life terms, because this could be anything. Someone may try to injure you physically. They may attack your family, your finances, your reputation. Perhaps they try to sleep with your spouse, right? The list can go on. There is clear intent. They had to think about it. They had to pick up that brick. Once they picked it up, they had to cock their arm back, then release in your direction. There were a lot of decisions that they had to make. There was a lot of energy that was required for them to put in for them to be able to actually hurt you. So should you have to forgive that person? Well, let me ask you this. What does your gut say? And listen, don't give me the church answer, right? The one that you know in your mind. But what does your gut say you should do? Hold on to that thought for just a second and we'll come back to it. Now, let me talk about a similar scenario, but a little different. What about a person who, let's say, is building something with bricks, and because of their carelessness, one fell and hit you and caused you injury. So in real life, this could be a situation where a person forgot to pay a bill that negatively affects your credit or your business. This person made a double commitment on the day of your wedding, and so they don't attend. They maybe damaged your fairly new car, right? So as you think about forgiveness, would you say that this person in this type of scenario should be forgiven? And what makes them different from that first scenario? I think this is one of those answers that we really have to assess and know why, for us personally, we're responding to each scenario differently if there is a difference in our answers. And as you're thinking about that, I want you to also ask yourself, what are your requirements to forgive? Everybody has them. They're either conscious or subconscious expectations when we're hurt by someone. Do you know your own requirements to forgive, right? Is it based on, okay, how they respond to that situation? Do you measure how quickly they respond and if they're remorseful? Are they genuine? How about, their willingness to fix any problem that they create no matter how long it takes? Maybe do they just have to say, I'm sorry? Are you looking for them to show remorse for at least 2 weeks? That's it, 2 weeks, and you'll be at peace. Maybe it's just a few days, How about you don't want to see them happy in your presence for at least 1 week after that incident occurred? After that, okay, then I'm willing to forgive. What are your stipulations for forgiveness? I think you'll have to think about like the last time you had to forgive someone and what were those requirements? And I would imagine it's different each time. You likely have different expectations depending on the offense. If it's minor, perhaps just an apology, maybe like a genuine look of remorse, small gift will suffice. If it's major, 6 months to a year before you speak to that person. And in that time, you're going to permit yourself to vent to anyone who will be willing to listen to you talk about the injustice that was done to you. Now, in some of the more serious cases, right, there are times where there are things like lawsuits or court cases that are involved because, let's be honest, some terrible things have happened to people that involve family members hurting other family members. So for some, before forgiveness can be considered, they require recompense. And so again, I ask, should that person who threw that brick be forgiven? And what are your requirements to forgive? As you're thinking, I'm going to just say what you're thinking and you feel it, but you just are afraid to say it. It's just not culturally appropriate. No, they should not be forgiven. And yes, there is a list of what needs to happen for them to receive your forgiveness. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. We really could stop the whole episode there because, to be honest, your willingness just to be transparent, to be authentic about how you really feel, that's 50% of what it takes for change to take place. Too many people have just been forced to pretend in order to meet all these social and religious standards. All the while, people are struggling and just carrying real hurt, real frustration, and continuing in the same pattern. So if you're able to think about how you really feel and give an honest answer, you're actually ahead of most people. I know some of you are telling yourselves that, you know what, I forgive right away, no matter the situation. And while that is definitely possible, let's just assess if it's actually true and how you can know if you've completely forgiven that person or if you're good at suppressing. Now, you know what it means to suppress, to put something away until it is no longer visible, right? You're stuffing it. You're no longer forced to deal with it. It's where you just kind of stop thinking about that situation until it's just not on your mind, or you become distracted with something else that just has the ability to grab your attention and pull you away from that thing until that thing is no longer on your mind, right? It's where even when the experience causes so much hurt that it's so intense and so deep that the brain will actually just disconnect from that situation, which means there's some dissociation that happens, but often in that process, the situation just gets stuffed and put somewhere else until a later time. These are just a few of the ways that you can subconsciously or consciously suppress hurt. Now, you can use any of these examples to ask yourself, when people have done things to you in your life, have you ever responded in any of those ways that I just listed? And let me just tell you, it's very possible that you really could genuinely forgive people maybe 75% of the time, right? Which is great. But today we want to talk about that other 25% and how those situations will impact you. Now, other than assessing if you tend to suppress situations, you can also assess your emotional and physical reactions to determine if you've actually forgiven that person. So, and before I give this list, let me say up front, There will be situations where someone has been, let's say, physically or even emotionally abused by someone. So it can take much longer for your brain and your body to heal. So it may not necessarily be true that you have not forgiven that person, but rather just that your nervous system has not fully healed, okay? But you always want to assess your heart and your physical and emotional responses. So here are some of the ways that you can do that. When you see or hear anything about that person, does your nervous system react? Meaning, do you get nervous? Do you get upset, right? Does your stomach start to hurt? Do you notice changes in your mood or your emotions when someone brings that person up in a conversation? Do you hold your breath when you see them, or you have to even think about talking to that person? Do you get offended, or upset for people just for even mentioning that person in the conversation? And say you're around them and you try your best. You avoid eye contact. You avoid their phone calls. You just try to avoid being around them in general. These are just a few indicators that you still may be holding on to unforgiveness. And again, for those of you that have learned how to suppress everything, it's possible that you have no physical or emotional response because your body has stored that situation in a place where it's not easily triggered, causing you to think that you've moved on, but really you're numb. Oh, but trust and believe, when a situation arises that is big enough, that is significant enough to you, it will trigger what's being hidden. And then your emotions just begin to flood and take over you. So this is just another reason why you really want to know with confidence if you have forgiven that person, and take the time to assess not just your thoughts about that individual, but how does your body react to them? How do your emotions, how does your nervous system react when you think about that situation and what they did? So earlier I talked about how, that person who threw that brick, how no, they should not be forgiven, right? And I'm sure you're thinking like, how in the world could she say something like that, right? Where is she going with all this? Well, it's simple. Because no one deserves forgiveness. So it's always fair to say that they should not be forgiven. But the truth is that forgiveness, it's not earned. It's not something that they deserve. And this is one of the hardest truths to embrace. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a choice that has to be made independent of what that person does or does not do, which is hard to embrace. It's hard to accept that truth because it can almost feel like a double punishment, right? Like you were imposed upon or taken advantage of or whatever happened, but then you have to make the decision, the choice to do the work to forgive. So it's all of this stuff. It can feel like it's on you. And when you look at it that way, it is unfair. It does feel unfair, almost as if you're being cruel to yourself. So I want to suggest that we reframe this idea of you just having to make a choice to forgive and say that instead you're making a choice to heal. Forgiveness, it's never for that person. Even if you tell them that you've forgiven them, that's great and merciful of you to do that, but they aren't actually receiving anything from you. They simply just get a peace of mind knowing that you're not holding on to something from within you against them. Now, maybe if you're the type of person that is vengeful, vindictive, passive aggressive, then sure, by you forgiving them, they don't have to deal with all of those things that would come along with the repercussions of what they did. But the truth is, forgiveness, it's about them, but it's actually for you. There was only one person who did an exchange for forgiveness, and his name is Jesus. He was the only one who actually took something on himself in exchange for the forgiveness that we would receive. But even in doing so, it was a gift to himself because he was able to redeem us back to him and save his people from eternal damnation. And because he loves us so much, it was just a win-win for both sides when he died for us to live. But when you choose to forgive, it's nothing like what Jesus did. You aren't saving that person, but you're actually saving yourself. You're stopping yourself from carrying the hurt, the pain, and the bitterness that leads to health challenges, mood fluctuations, issues in your relationships. You're actually setting yourself free. It's the reason why you don't really ever have to tell that person you've forgiven them, because it's not about them. Your choice to forgive is a gift to yourself. It's like, let's say for women, when they get this labor push gift, right? You do all the hard work of dealing with the pain involved of birthing a child, and so you get a gift from your spouse for that sacrifice that you made. But instead, in this case, the other person isn't giving you the gift. You're loving yourself enough to give it to yourself. Why? Because you are deserving of what comes when you do forgive. You are deserving of the peace, the freedom, and the joy that you have when you're not carrying around pain in your daily life. You're deserving of the joy that comes from not being under the control of things from the past or the behaviors and brokenness of other people. It's liberating to not be bound to people, because when you don't forgive, you're actually technically bound to that person until you do. So forgiveness is never about that other person. They are just the triggering event for you to give yourself that gift. Now, when you give yourself that gift of forgiveness, it begins the process of signaling your spirit, your soul, and your physical body that you are not interested or willing to carry around any side effects that are connected to being hit with that brick. It's you putting all of you on alert that healing is your portion, that being whole is your portion, that you refuse to be bound to any person or situation, and that nothing or no one will rob you of what you deserve and what God desires for you. That's so good. Friends, listen, I know it's easy to accept gifts, but it's hard for you to give a gift to yourself, especially when you know that it's a gift that you're going to have to keep on giving, because people are people, and they are going to knowingly or unknowingly throw bricks for the rest of your life. And even if it's not directed at you, it may be directed at someone you love. So this gift of forgiveness, it has to become ingrained into your nature, into your mindset so deeply that you shock even yourself as to how merciful you've become. And when you get to that place, this is when you are thriving as a human being. This is when you can rest assured that God is saying, job well done. Okay, so Nicole Cherie, I've forgiven these people, but I will never forget. Okay, but why not? Why is it necessary to remember? And how does that memory make you feel? Our story is our story, so we will always have memories of good and bad things. But when that memory elicits negative feelings, you have to let it go. You have not healed until you do. Now, I'm not saying that you have to forget, right? Because it may be impossible to, but you absolutely must let it go. Your emotions can only carry but so much. And what you hold on to, it has a weight attached to it. But what you release, it creates space for something healthier to come in. Let it go. It is time. Take that brick and build houses for those who need shelter. Take those arrows that were shot at you and turn them into wall decor for the homeless. Those scars on your body, use them to empower others to be confident in themselves no matter what the situation is. Your story did not end when you were hit with that situation. It ends when you say it ends. I remember carrying unforgiveness for many years towards different family members, and in my mind, it was justified and it was my way of just holding them accountable. But that unforgiveness, it became very self-destructive behavior that made me the antagonist in my own story. The harm that was done to me, I made it worse. I deepened the scars and allowed for new ones to be created, all because I felt justified to carry unforgiveness. No matter how angry I was, no matter how passive aggressive I would be, it did not change the people around me. It only changed me. It made me into the opposite of who I really was, who I wanted to be. It made me a person who would throw bricks when I felt it was justified. I, like so many of you, took on this mindset to never become a victim, but ultimately all I was doing was becoming a master of suppressing my feelings and disconnecting from the hard things in life. But I thank God for his mercy, for his grace, in that not only did he pull me out of that dark and destructive place, but he saved and delivered me from all those situations where I really should not have been able to come back from and be here with you all today. You know, in his love, in his mercy, he then transformed me to have a heart to forgive. And because of that, how could I ever withhold mercy from those who throw bricks my way? And more importantly, how can you? Today is not a long talk, it's not a long episode, but I hope that it's one that can help you to truly be set free from carrying any kind of unforgiveness in your heart, in your body. And it's not easy to give yourself that gift, but be determined that no matter what, that you keep your peace that only comes from him, and you ensure that you are enjoying this life from a place of wholeness and joy. All right. Well, you know what time it is. This is the time where we get to discuss a phrase, pattern, or belief that has been a hindrance to many in the culture. But if we eradicate it, it would improve your life, your family, and the community.
It's chain breaking time.
The behavior pattern that we are addressing today, well, let me describe it and see if you can guess. It's when someone does something to you that hurts you and you don't react right away. You kind of find this unexpected time to say something and that you think will trigger them to get upset, or you do something that you know that will get them back, but it's in a very discreet way. Have you figured it out? I'm sure you have guessed. It's passive aggressive behavior. I've heard it said about even certain cities that they are known for having "I'm gonna get you back" approach to life. Really? A whole city? Listen, something has to shift. That is the mindset of Satan that we have allowed to penetrate our hearts, our families, and our communities. When you're passive aggressive, no matter how insignificant it may seem, it's never justified. Passive aggressive behavior, it's sneaky, vindictive, it's outright evil. Let's just call it what it is. Can we instead choose to forgive, to let it go, to show mercy, and to do unto others as we would like to have them do unto us? Let light be the standard for our communities, not darkness. We all have to do better. Let me close with a final word of encouragement. The scars will heal, the emotions will settle, and the mind will be at peace because God is taking you to another level. You are no longer bound. I see you set free. You are no longer going through cycles. When I look at you, his light is what I see. Shine because you were born to shine. Soar high because you were born to fly. Just continue to walk in love and know that no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper because the Lord God Almighty is on your side. Until next time, shalom.